Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast, which helps entrepreneurs generate more impact, wealth, and success, attract others for all the right reasons, and become a smart connector, the architect of your amazing business and life. This podcast is sponsored by Virtual Non-Execs, the world's #1 peer-to-peer board advisor community, which connects thousands of investors, entrepreneurs, and advisors globally. Welcome to the Smart Connector podcast. As ever, I have such an exciting guest for you, Kyle Stout. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you for having me.
So Kyle's the founder of Elevate and Scale. He's a specialist in email marketing, SMS, and automation. And he works with many direct-to-consumer and e-commerce brands to help them unlock hidden revenue and put their sales on autopilot while spending less on advertising. So it's a real pleasure to have you here with us, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we're going to unlock the secrets of marketing automation, SMS, email marketing, and you're going to open the door, aren't you, to all of those wonderful secrets?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, Carl, before we get into it, could you just tell us how did this interest and this passion for email marketing and marketing automation evolve? Where did it all start for you?
So it started, I started as a freelance copywriter, and I was doing a lot of sales copy for businesses' websites. And that led to me doing copywriting for, other things that they had going on. So it could have been their emails, their ads, social media posts, things like that. And over time, I ran into one challenge for myself personally, where by doing all these one-off projects, I was having a lot of these feast and famine cycles that a lot of freelancers deal with, because I would go from being completely overwhelmed with work to not having very much work, and then going back to being overwhelmed. And I wanted to have more consistency. So I was looking, okay, how can I do something that's more recurring? And while that was happening, I had been doing some email marketing for some of my clients. And I noticed that, for one, I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed setting up all the automations and coming up with topics for new email campaigns. But it was also the area where I was seeing the best results and the most consistent results for my clients. So whenever I wanted to go create a marketing agency, I knew that was the service that I wanted to build around and to specialize in.
Yeah, and marketing is very much a specialist industry. We were chatting about this earlier, weren't we? If you want to get really good results, it's always better to hire the experts, isn't it?
Oh, I definitely think so, because I've seen it from both sides. I've seen it where when I first started, I tried to be an all-in-one agency, and I hired some other people to manage the other services, and they weren't as good as they seemed to be. And I realized that, my own knowledge, while I knew what the outcomes should look like, I didn't know all of the nitty-gritty details of those things to really be able to oversee what they were doing. And so it's very difficult to be great at everything. And so that has been a lesson I've learned, that whenever I hire people for things, for any kind of outside service we do, I prefer to work with specialists, because they just know the ins and outs way better than someone who's more of a generalist. And even whenever people tend to cater towards your type of business or your industry, I especially like that. And even beyond services, but getting into software and things like that's one of the preferences I have, is if software has the features I need, but that particular software is designed for my business type, it makes my life so much easier. So I definitely recommend looking for specialization.
Yeah, definitely. So you do a lot of work with B2C and e-commerce brands, don't you, Carl? So what trends are you seeing? What's actually happening in the marketplace today that's different, say, from a few years ago?
So one of the most interesting trends I've noticed just over the last several years has been the rise in popularity of SMS marketing, specifically from consumers, because obviously it's getting more popular amongst marketers, because we're always going to take advantage of every new tool that comes available. But if people don't respond to it, then there's no point in doing it. And personally, I did not like SMS marketing as a consumer. If I were to look back, 10 years ago, And I was always very hesitant to do it. And clients would ask, and I would really take a very conservative approach with it. In fact, they usually had to kind of nudge me into it more. I was not the one to bring it up because I had this bias against it. I just didn't like companies having that direct access to me. And I made the mistake of thinking that everyone else feels that way. And there are a lot of people that do that way. But what we're seeing is that, especially amongst the younger demographics, there's a lot of people who are starting now to actually prefer SMS over email. And they especially prefer it from their favorite brands, and especially from e-commerce brands. So the businesses who are selling products online. So we're seeing that not only is it rising in popularity, but a lot of times the people who sign up for your SMS list are actually, they end up being your best customers. They end up being the quickest to buy, and they end up spending more.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I also want to pick up on your point about it being a generational thing, because I noticed that even in my own family, because I always said to my children, don't just use something like SMS to make practical arrangements. Let's meet at the mall, at 8 p.m. or something, or what time are you coming over? Because that is how I used it. I noticed that in their generation, they communicate as openly on SMS as they do in conversation. And they blend it seamlessly, which I don't necessarily think always works, but somehow it is just the way they do it. So for them, SMS is just conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is really interesting to see the generational shifts, because so I'm in the older segment of millennials. Some people call it like an elder millennial. So when I was a kid, I remember not having internet, computers not really being a thing. And so even to this day, I still prefer to do important stuff on a desktop as opposed to my phone. Even with shopping, it's like I feel like I just can't really, to me, it's something about comparing the products on my desktop. I just like that better than on my phone. But that's not how a lot of people my age and most of the people younger think at all. In fact, they find it so inconvenient. They think it's way faster to just pull your phone out, and they're just so much more tuned into the mobile experience that that's what they're comfortable with. So they actually enjoy it better.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I guess when you're working with these, direct to consumer brands, obviously they will be targeting a particular avatar, won't they? And so they will probably have a demographic that is very receptive, I would imagine. If you're working on SMS campaigns, maybe they will be a younger demographic. Are you finding that?
Yeah, and just to make the point clear, so SMS is nowhere close to what we're doing with email as far as the total number of subscribers, the total amount of revenue we're driving for businesses. Email is still by far the biggest, but you can get more revenue per contact added to your SMS list. That's the interesting thing. And what's interesting is they do tend to skew younger, but the cool thing with e-commerce businesses is that a lot of people are passionate about shopping. People love to shop. They love to buy this stuff. So what we find is it's not just the younger demographic. It's also the people who are just the avid online shoppers of all ages are also the ones who like SMS, because it's like whenever there's a sale, they like to jump on the sale right away. And that's fun and exciting to them. So it's not just limited to an age group, but I find age is a big factor, but then it's also just that pleasure in shopping, that kind of psychographic that you find that at all ages. So it has been pretty interesting to see even older people, middle-aged people adopting SMS over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So let's just talk about email marketing and why should people care? Why should business owners be using more email marketing?
So email marketing, if you look at the statistics, it tends to be or have the highest ROI for every dollar spent. So it's a very cost-effective sales channel. But to me, that is a definite great feature. But the main thing that I would tell people as far as why you need to be doing email marketing is that email allows you to have a direct line of communication to your leads and customers on a platform that you actually own and control, which is getting pretty rare nowadays, because with social media and other platforms, you put all of this time, money, and energy into creating amazing content and building up an audience.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you can have dramatic changes in the results you're getting because they might make an algorithm change where now all of a sudden a significant portion of the people who already followed you aren't seeing your posts, unless you run paid ads or something like that. Or it could be something happens to your account and it gets taken down temporarily. There's just a lot of things out of your control, and you've done all this work and you never actually got to own the contact information of these people who likely would want to hear from you, even if something happened to your page on Instagram or Facebook, for example. So I always encourage people that even if you're not going to have some robust email marketing strategy, at least just start building out your list now, because in the future, if you don't have it, you're going to regret it. And if you do have it, you're going to be very thankful that you do.
Yeah. Fantastic advice there, Kyle. So how important is the message and the copy in terms of keeping your audience engaged? Or is it more just about putting those emails out regularly and making sure that they are just going out like clockwork and right in front of people? So what's the kind of emphasis that people should be putting on those two areas?
To me, the messaging is definitely the most important part, but there is something to the frequency as well, because you can have amazing emails, and if you don't show up very often, people forget who they're getting these emails from. They forget why they signed up, and it becomes too foreign to them. So you want to have a regular touch point. But the main thing, as far as actually keeping people engaged long term with your emails and get them to want to keep opening and keep clicking and buying, is you have to have a message that resonates. So it's always going to come back to the message and really tailoring that message to your ideal customers.
Yeah. And that is something, obviously, it's an art form, isn't it? I mean, the best copywriters in the world, they are paid handsomely, aren't they? Because you cannot underestimate the power of that message to market, can you?
No, and that's actually where I would spend the most. So back when I was just doing copywriting, I spent more time on all of the prep work of really understanding the ideal customer I was writing for and understanding how am I going to connect the benefits of this brand and their products to this person in a way that really speaks to them and that they're really going to care. I put more effort into that than I did in actually writing the copy. And I found that the more I did front load the work by doing that initial, extra work up front, the better the results would be. And so that's something that I've kept with me as I went and started my agency to do email marketing, is that, a lot of the businesses we work with, their founders they're passionate and they're really knowledgeable of their customers. So they had good messaging without actually understanding the strategies of what they were doing.
Yeah.
But they're not good at getting that out of their own head and translating it to other people. So one of the first things we do during onboarding is we run through a whole session of creating the messaging strategy for their business before we write any copy, because we want to make sure we really understand who are their ideal customers and what are the things they care about most.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, obviously I have a program called Ideal Client Success. So I always work with that on my own clients as well, because that's where it all starts, isn't it? It absolutely all starts there, doesn't it? It's understanding their problem, their pain, their dream, and all of those other good things, right?
Yeah. And I think some people, they hear this so often, they think, yeah, I already know that. But if you haven't actually set aside the time to do that work, there's a reason why marketers will always come back to this thing, and it really is the foundation, and it's something you can't skip that step. I mean, sometimes you might have gotten lucky because you were just naturally good at it and you didn't realize. So you might have gotten to a certain level of success based on your own intuition and knowledge of your customer. But to really be able to grow and hire other people who are going to do this, write the copy for your business on your behalf, you have to do that initial work if you want everything to be aligned and to be strategic.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask some really tactical things now, Kyle. So let's start off with, how long should the sentences be?
Okay, yeah. So I like to keep sentences and paragraphs short. For one, it's just easier to read, but it also creates a challenge for you as the copywriter to be more impactful with what you're saying. So the copy ends up being a little bit more punchier, and it hits them a little bit more with the emotions, assuming you're using the right language. And it's way easier to read and memorize, and easier for people to skim, because it's very difficult to get people to actually read whatever piece of copy you put out. If it's an email or a blog post or whatever, it's very difficult to get someone to actually read the whole thing. So the easier you make it, the more likely they will actually get the message.
Yes. So should you use simple words over, let's just say, more flowery ones?
Yes, in the vast majority of cases. So you want to just be friendly, conversational, simple. Write. A good rule of thumb is to write at a third grade reading level. And it's not so much that everyone online is dumb, right? Like, that's something that people will joke about. You have to consider that people are very distracted. They have so much going on in their head. They have so many things coming at them online, whether it's social media posts or emails. You're all competing for their attention. So, and again, you want to make sure they actually get the message you're trying to convey. So the more you use, industry language that they don't understand, or if you're using big words because you think it makes you sound smarter, it actually has the opposite effect, because a lot of people, it's just not easier for people to skim. And then you also have some people who just don't know what you're talking about whenever you talk that way.
Yeah. Never underestimate how much attention people are giving you. I think that's a good rule of thumb, isn't it? Because most of the time they've always got half an eye on something else, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's busy. They have a lot going on. So, and you have to consider that when you write the copy.
Yes. So what about frequency, Kyle? How often should emails be going out? Is there a rule of thumb?
Okay, so there's not one frequency that every business should stick to, but what I would suggest is testing it, and I'll tell you how you can configure this for you. I see both ends of the spectrum. There are businesses that are sending emails way too often, and their list is just not as engaged because they're just burning people out. They're just doing too much. And a lot of times these are businesses where they're trying to get too much revenue from their email in the short term. And so they're just sending out too many emails. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I actually see, this is pretty common, where I see businesses, and it's a lot of times businesses that are doing really well, and they've just really dialed in other sales channels, and they've kind of neglected email marketing, and they don't send emails near enough. So they might only send them, the occasional holiday sale, or, once a month or something like that. And that will also hurt engagement, because again, people just kind of forget they're on the list, and they want to have this, it should feel like, a real human conversation where you interact with someone on a regular basis. So what I would suggest to people is, when you're trying to dial in your frequency, and let's just say you're in the camp of not sending enough, then start sending a little bit more often. So start with like once a week. You can commit to that. If you can't, then every other week. And do this for 3-4 weeks, and look at your open rates, click rates, conversion rates. And then increase the frequency a little bit more. So if you were doing every other week, bump it up to once a week. And if you're doing once a week, bump it up to twice a week. And if you still see the exact same performance for the next 3 or 4 weeks, you can get away with that. And maybe you could even try bumping it up a little bit more. Once you see a big drop, that's where you've found the limit where, because the whole thing is, yes, you can squeeze out some more sales by sending more emails, but if people don't like that, you get more unsubscribes, and you get a lot of people who don't unsubscribe, but they just start ignoring your emails. So you don't want to get to that point. One of the really important things to also consider with your frequency is, if you do want to get to where you're sending more emails, and this is something that every business that has a big list should do no matter what, is to start using segmentation, meaning that if I'm going to send out 2 or 3 campaigns every week, every campaign doesn't go to everyone on the list. You want to target specific segments. So they could be people who have bought a certain product in the past. So they could be people that are segmented based on their gender or their location. There's all kinds of segments you can create. And then you tailor the message of that email to that segment. So now they're getting a much more targeted and personalized email. You're being able to send out more emails, but you're not getting the negative backlash of sending too many emails.
Yeah, very good point. In terms of the segmentation, how big do you think a business has to be before they do segmentation? Let's just say you're a solopreneur. You're just selling your one particular service, and you just started doing email for the first time. maybe you're selling B2B. So you might have a decision maker avatar and, an influencer avatar, for example. Would you, in that particular instance, would you segment your email so that you have one set of messages that is going out to the decision maker and one that is going out to the influencer? Or would you keep it just simple?
Okay, so I'll give you a couple of scenarios of why you might decide one versus the other. So
Okay.
if let's just say they're under 1,000 subscribers
Yeah.
and they are already generating some consistent revenue from their email marketing. Now they may not have this huge list, but if you're already generating some revenue, it's worthwhile to invest your time and energy into the sales channel a little bit more. Obviously, just you do the segmentation, now you can create more emails, more personalization. It's worthwhile, but you don't have to jump into that level of segmentation yet, unless because if, for example, if you're not really generating much revenue and you have a really small list, it might be better to either not segment or use an engagement-based segment group. So this would be, I call them like 30-day engaged groups, 60-day engaged, and so on. And what that means is that someone has engaged with your emails in the last 30, 60, 90, whatever time frame you put. And by engaged, I mean they've opened or clicked an email. And so the point of that is we're going to send out most of our emails to the people who are the most engaged. And then when we have a big sale or a big announcement or whatever, then we're going to send that out to the whole list or to the wider group. So the point of that is that the people who are the most engaged are the ones who want to hear from you the most. The people who are less engaged typically don't want to hear as often, but they want to know when there's something exciting going on. So you don't want to leave them out.
Yeah.
So that's a way you can balance that engagement. And it's a very simple type of segment to get started with. So, but it's not as much about list size. So if you are generating a lot of revenue from email and you have distinct groups, it's worthwhile to start tailoring the messages more to those groups.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great advice. Okay. So what else? Let me think. Right. So if you are a consultant or a coach or some form of an expert, as some of my audiences are, how would you tailor your message that would be different, for example, to, say, an e-commerce brand?
Okay, so the first thing is how you even get them into your email list in the first place. So with an e-commerce brand, the free offer or the lead magnet or whatever you want to call it that gets them to opt in is usually going to be a discount code on their first purchase. It could be a free gift with purchase or free shipping. It's something tied to purchase, and it doesn't need to be very complicated for e-commerce. For consultant service-based businesses, it's usually a little harder to get people to sign up because you're dealing with business people who they know when they just are more aware of what you're doing from a marketing standpoint.
Yeah.
And they need a little bit more compelling offer to get them to sign up in the first place. And so that's where you have a PDF, a free video training, anything that I would recommend providing them with a quick win, something they can put to action right away and get a quick win.
Yeah.
And then you want to make sure they enroll in an automated sequence where after that you are introducing your company or yourself, what you're all about, why you're different, and then maybe sharing testimonials if you have those, and then starting to push them into the next offer. So it could be a lower ticket item before they get the big offer if you have that. Otherwise, it's going to start letting them know. There's this thing a strategy that people use for a long time where they felt like they had to do this long nurturing, this long 30 days, 60 days of nurturing before they could ever pitch. And I don't find that to actually be true. I think especially with business people, they know what you're doing. They know how the game works. And if they signed up, they are probably in the market, assuming that the free offer is targeted towards someone who would be hiring you, not targeted towards someone who's trying to learn your thing. That's an important distinction we can talk about. And so they want to know. So if you wait too long, they're going to end up getting sold by someone else because they're probably comparing other people too. So I don't think you should waste time. You should just give them the important information they need up front to kind of vet you and to help them make a buying decision by also providing the information about what you're offering. So it's a lot on those initial automation sequences. And then as far as the ongoing email marketing with the campaigns you're setting up, really it's showing up with value. There's a little bit more pressure on showing up with value than their product businesses. And so I like to just, think of ways where, okay, how can I give them a quick tip or bring up something that's important? It could be discussing something that's a news headline that's relevant to your industry. And then you just have you just take the conversation where by the time you get to the end of the email, you segue it into your offer, right? And so it's like, it doesn't have to be this super aggressive thing. Is that you're showing up often, you are providing value often, and you're always letting them know that you're available whenever they're in the market.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to go back to that point that you made earlier about people who would actually be customers or clients of yours as opposed to people who want to learn what you do. What did you mean by that?
So this is something that I discovered just, working with different businesses. And it's something that once I saw it, I could never unsee it, where it really applies a lot to the content you're doing on social media as well. So for example, for me, I put out YouTube videos around email marketing. And I do have a lot of tutorial videos showing you step by step how to go into Klaviyo, which is the email platform I like to use, how to create segments, how to do this and that. The thing is that most of the people who are watching those videos are people who are doing it themselves. So a lot of them are other email marketers trying to get better at email marketing. And sometimes they are business owners who are bootstrapping and doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And that's great. And I like helping those people out. But those people are not my ideal customer, because my ideal customer doesn't have the time to do it themselves. They don't want to do it themselves. And they are in a position where they can hire someone else. So the content I create for them is more around the what and the why. So this is what you need to be doing. This is why you need to be doing it. But if you don't talk about how to do it, because I want them to hire me to do it. So for the free offer, you want to think about some sort of training or some sort of, PDF or whatever that focuses more on the what and the why and less on the how, unless it's, again, something that, let's just say you offer a service where they would need to be doing this component of the service and you're going to handle everything else.
Yeah.
You tell them how to do the piece that they need to do, and you tell them what and why for all the other stuff. And then they have to hire you to get to do the other part.
Yeah, so that's very clear. So basically, when you are communicating the how, you are more likely to have people engage with that content if they want to know how to do it themselves, rather than the what and the why, which are people who are more likely to become paying clients of yours because they don't want to learn the how. They want you to help them with it, right?
Exactly. And this is something that I think everyone who has had the idea of where, okay, I'm going to start creating content in my space. The natural thing to think is, I need to create all of this how-to content. I need to show people how much I know about this and how good I am at it. And so there is value in having some of that content just to prove it, right? But you also just kind of run out of things to talk about. You run out of ways. Like, once you've shown how to do everything, you run out of more things to show how to do. It's like, if you really gave great step-by-step tutorials, I mean, that's it. That's how you do it. So, and I think there's also this tendency of, because there's a pressure on us to always provide value. And there's a tendency, I've fallen into this trap myself, of feeling like I'm not providing enough value if I don't tell them how to do it. But then you have to remind yourself of who you're speaking to. And for example, like my ideal client, a lot of times they just don't know much about email marketing. So the what and why is value to them, because this is an area that they just don't know. They're an expert on product development, or they're an expert on sales, or something else. And so they actually need to know the what and the why before they're going to be compelled to actually have an active email marketing program.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense, because, as you said, they are experts in what they do, but they are not expert marketers. And so sometimes we have to take them a little bit further back in terms of, well, obviously where we are. If we are experts in our own field, we can't make any assumptions that they know what we know by any means, can we?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's just hard to forget, or hard to remember that, what it's like to not know anything about this, because you've just been doing it for so long, and it seems obvious to you, but it's not obvious to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Kyle, let's just go into this thing we were talking about a little bit earlier, of these new regulations to do with SMS, because there's obviously been, over the last few years, there's been quite a strong emphasis on this GDPR here in the UK about privacy, data protection, all of that kind of thing. And there are some changes happening in the marketplace, aren't there? So what would our viewers and listeners need to know about those changes in order to make sure that they don't breach any data laws or get into trouble or get sued or anything that they wouldn't want to happen?
Yeah, there's a couple of big things. The first one is you just don't want to be ever sending SMS messages to people who have not given you permission to do that. So I mean, we've all gotten those text messages. They're just random spam things, and we never signed up for this. And a lot of times they may not even they're not traditional spam, as in like they're not scams or anything. They could be legitimate businesses or organizations, but they didn't, they acquired your SMS or your phone number from some other source, right? You didn't actually sign up to that thing. And so a lot of times you might actually have a database of phone numbers from customers, but they did not opt in to receive SMS marketing from you. So you can't, I mean, you could try it, but I wouldn't recommend it because this is where they're cracking down. So you really don't want to actually start sending those people SMS messages until they have formally opted in.
Yeah.
So the crackdown is really on that. So just trying to get rid of people sending those messages without permission. And the other thing is just transparency around how are you managing this. So you have to have language in your terms and condition and privacy policy around the fact that whenever they opt in for SMS messages, that they are opting in to receive marketing messages from you, and that you're not going to share their data or whatever you are going to do. It has to be spelled out. So when you sign up to these different platforms to do SMS marketing, most of the good ones now are going to force you to check a bunch of boxes saying that you've done all these things, and they're going to force you to link to your privacy policy and your terms and conditions on your opt-in boxes. And they'll even provide you with language you can use to copy and paste, where you just change your business name and you change anything you would want to. So they make it easy for you, but you need to have these things in place. This is not something that you really want to take risks with, because there have been businesses that have been sued. So it's not something I would recommend trying to bend the rules with, even if you're tempted because you're like, man, I've got this big list of all these numbers and they did give them to me, but didn't actually sign up for SMS marketing. I would say just don't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great advice. So Kyle, what I wanted to talk about is data, right? So, I mean, obviously there are companies that specialize in data. So obviously, if you're running something like Facebook ads and somebody opts in or they purchase something, then they give you permission effectively to communicate with them. But with these data companies which they create lists. I mean, it's their job to provide data to companies. What is the best way to warm up those people without basically getting banned, getting, flagged up as spamming? Well, in fact, really, what is just best practice, I suppose, is the question, if you are working with raw, cold data.
Okay, so are you referring to if you're doing, say you got a list of target people for your industry and you want to send outreach emails?
Exactly, but they have not opted in at this point.
Okay. Yeah, it's getting increasingly difficult to do that because I can tell you what people are doing that is what's working, and you might not want to actually do it once I tell you what it takes. So I would say if you really want to have the absolute best results, or you want to do it in a way that people are the most receptive to, it really has to be personalized. So it's very difficult to do that. That would mean you have to actually research each individual person and make this message totally personalized. And so it's usually not worthwhile unless these contacts are people where you can actually find all their information on LinkedIn and you know that they're the perfect fit and you have the perfect offering for them. Otherwise, when you're getting these lists, I can tell you what people are that is working, and they are just creating a bunch of domains that point to their main domain, and they are sending messages where they've pulled in a little bit of personalized information. So they might, and a lot of this is automated, so they'll fill in something that they pulled from their LinkedIn. So they might be able to fill in the person's name, their title, their business name, some kind of fun fact about them, like based on where they went to college or something. And then you want to keep the pitch really short. But really, it's a numbers game. So just for the record, this is not a service that my company does. We only deal with inbound email marketing, but I am familiar with this because I see this a lot amongst email marketers. And So this was working really well even just a couple of years ago, actually, just by having that one line of personalization
Yeah.
and assuming that the offer you had in that email was compelling to that person. This was really, people just weren't getting any kind of personalization in these cold outreach emails in the past. So just that little bit was enough to be able to get to book a lot of calls. Now, because so many people are in this space and they've automated this thing at scale, the ones who are getting consistent results tend to be the ones where they've got 10 different domains running and they're literally emailing like thousands of people every day. And they're
Numbers
constantly
game.
having to close down these domains because the domains get flagged with spam too many times and no one gets their emails and they have to set up a new one. So just to, be transparent and share, like, yes, I do know of people who are having success with it, but also I want you to see kind of the challenges and what it's really going to take just to be realistic. Like if you buy a list of 1,000 leads and you set out a campaign, even with the best copy in the world, it's not going to generate as much of a result as you probably think, mainly because it's just been so saturated and the people on that list have been targeted so many times. It's like, they just see you as another one of these people. And so it is hard to get through. But to answer your question about warming them up, it's really not as much about having this long drawn out sequence of trying to warm them up when you're going cold. It usually starts with, you have to have a really compelling offer. So some kind of like strong guarantee or promise or unique spin on your offer to catch their attention early on. Once they've started to engage with you, then you can go more into the more traditional nurturing and warming up type of messaging.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely fantastic advice. Thank you so much for that, Kyle. And, I was also thinking as we were speaking, and I know this isn't the topic of the podcast, but I was thinking about LinkedIn because I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So sometimes I reach out to people on LinkedIn and I've tried different things and I've noticed that adding a little bit of personalization, and all I do when I do this is I say, we're connected via, and then I use a name. So if I find somebody, for example, who has made a comment on somebody that I'm connected to, and I think, that was a good comment, then I will just send a message to say, we're connected via, and then this person. And I found that the response has been massively, massively better than when I just send a more generic message. So just anecdotally, I just wanted to back up what you're saying. People do respond to personalization because the level of the scale of communications that we're bombarded with every day is just, as you said, it's just insane, isn't it, really? So it catches our attention, doesn't it, when they say something that it's, it's basically all about us or something about us, even if it's just one small detail.
Yeah, and what's interesting is a lot of the people who are doing these big outreach programs where they've got all these, email systems automated. One of the areas where they start off their campaigns and where they actually see a lot of the initial success is through LinkedIn and also other social media channels.
Yeah.
Because it is a little bit more personal. So it's not just some random email. They can, for like what you're doing is really smart because just by mentioning that you met through someone else, especially if they are really close with that person or if they, if it has top of mind recognition, it instantly filters you out from all of the strangers online. But
Definitely.
they can also click through to your profile. So it's like they can instantly get a feel for who you are as opposed to just some random email.
Yeah. And it's very simple to do, of course. It just takes a little bit more effort than just copying and pasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, that's really, that's good to know. That's good to be endorsed for that, Kyle. So tell us what is, the next year looking like for you? Where do you actually want to take the business, say, over the next 12 months?
So one of the projects I'm working on right now, so of course we're going to continue to work with our clients, but I've especially from doing YouTube, I've met a lot of people who just aren't in the market yet to hire an agency, but they still don't know enough yet to do it on their own. So I'm working on a course. It's not available yet, but that's my next big project for this year is I've already got a lot of the content filmed, but I'm putting out a course to show people step by step how to do everything because I wanted to have an offering for a lot of the small business owners who, just because they can't hire an agency, like they still want to maximize this sales channel and they want to get great results and they want to do things right. And so they might keep it in-house, or they might later hire someone, but by the time they hire them, it's already been well managed at that point. So yeah, that's the big project for me.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And as you said, it's going to be perfect as well for people who are, they're startups, or they're just, solopreneurs, or they're just really kind of getting going, and they need to learn it, as well as people who they just want to get a better grasp, perhaps, of email marketing principles so that they can actually manage people more effectively who have that role, right? So I think that's a great idea. Yeah, well, Carl, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today, and such a fascinating topic. And I personally have learned so much. So I just wanted to thank you for joining us. And you're in Oklahoma, right?
Yep, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay. And do you work all over the US, or do you work outside the US, or do you work locally? Where are most of your clients based?
Most of them are in the US. I've got some in Canada. I've got one in the UK. So I don't, it really just kind of worked out that way. So
Yeah.
in the past, I've worked with people all over the world. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, mostly in North America, I would say.
Amazing. Okay. Well, if somebody wants to reach out to you and contact you, or maybe see more of what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best place to get in touch would be on the website elevateandscale.com.
Mhm.
Otherwise, if you just want to, get more content, learn more about email marketing, I would recommend following or subscribing to my YouTube channel, because that's where I'm putting out most of my content, and that's the same handle.
Elevate and Scale YouTube channel. That sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. It's been such a pleasure, as I said. Great to have you here. And thank you very much for helping me move my knowledge along in terms of this really important topic as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Jane Bayler is the Smart Connector, a London-based, passionate serial entrepreneur, brand marketer and business growth exploder who helps overlooked and undervalued consultants and sector experts generate consistent, scalable revenues through becoming the go-to choice of their dream clients. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate you liking, rating, and reviewing the podcast on the platform you've heard it on. And check out the links in the show notes if you'd like to connect with Jane or any of her guests in person. Thank you for listening, and come back soon.